Ombuds Day 2024. I want to welcome you to our virtual Ombuds Day event. My name is Ryan Smith. I've had the pleasure of serving as the co-chair for this year's Ombuds Day subcommittee, along with Marcus Stergio. The committee is comprised of representatives from a diverse group of ombuds organizations across North America, including the American Bar Association Ombuds Committee, the Coalition of Federal Ombudsmen, the International Ombuds Association, the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsmen, the United States Ombudsman Association, and the Association des Ombudsmen and Enseignement Supérieur de Québec. This year marks the 7th annual recognition of Ombuds Day. Our theme for Ombuds Day this year is Here to Hear You. This theme highlights the role that listening plays for ombuds. Whether we're organizational, governmental, or advocate ombuds, internally or externally facing ombuds, ombuds who work in educational institutions, corporations, or even news ombudsmen. Our role is to listen to the concerns that people have and to help them to seek resolutions. Our methods and outcomes may sometimes look different, but it all begins by being and feeling truly heard. I want to thank this year's Ombuds Day subcommittee members who put in a significant amount of work. They include Belinda Robinson with the Coalition of Federal Ombuds, Ellen Miller from the International Ombuds Association, Jessica Whitmore from the United States Ombudsman Association, Teresa Teeple with the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs, and Julie Boncompin with the Association des Ombudsmen et Enseignement Supérieur de Québec. I'd also like to thank Dr. Chinwe Igbaniki Umegbolu for her assistance with marketing and graphics, and Talia Martinez, our Ombuds Committee Fellow, for all of her work to support this program, including graphics, communications, committee, and technical support. I'd also like to thank the staff of the ABA section of dispute resolution. They're running this event right now and have provided a substantial amount of technical and marketing support. Meg Willoughby and Alec Chapa, who've served with me as co-chairs of the ABA Ombuds Committee for their ongoing support of this event. Ken Skadacek, our former subcommittee chair and former co-chair of the ABA Ombuds Committee, who's been supporting Ombuds Day for many years now, and who's still maintaining the web and email presence. Also our colleagues who run the Resolutions podcast for hosting an Ombuds Day themed episode, where they interviewed Teresa Teeple, Ombuds Day subcommittee member, and the Tennessee State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for highlighting the important work of the long-term care ombuds. This podcast can be found on the Ombuds Day site or wherever you get your podcasts. And last but not least, I want to recognize Marcus Stergio, the Ombuds Day Subcommittee co-chair. Marcus provided leadership to the Ombuds Day Subcommittee, served as editor for the Just Resolutions newsletter that came out recently, coordinated the process to request and receive, I think we're at 34 state proclamations now and counting from across the United States. And he worked to coordinate the panel that we're going to hear from today. And you'll hear more from him shortly. Thank you, Marcus. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge our colleagues and everyone else who's been impacted by the hurricanes recently, Milton and Helen. Please know that our thoughts and prayers are with you on this day. So at this time, I have the high honor of introducing Sir Rob Behrens, who will introduce and proclaim this year's Ombuds Day. Sir Behrens brings a long and distinguished career as an ombudsman, and I'll provide some highlights by way of introduction. So after serving in the UK Civil Service, including appointments as the Secretary to the Committee on Standards and Public Life and the Complaints Commissioner to the Bar in England and Wales, Sir Behrens served 2 terms as the Higher Education Ombudsman in England and Wales. And after this, went on to serve as the UK Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman from 2017 to 2024. During this time, Sir Behrens served on the European and World Boards of the International Ombudsman Institute and played a crucial role in creating Ombudsman Peer Review, the IOI European Learning Academy, the Ombudsman Support to the Parliamentary Human Rights Commission of Ukraine. Sir Behrens has authored many publications, including on being an ombudsman in higher education, and The Art of the Ombudsman, Leadership Through International Crisis. Sir Behrens has been a leader in the European Network for Ombuds in Higher Education and is an honorary life member of that organization. Notably, Sir Behrens was made a CBE in 2015 and received a knighthood for public service this year in 2024. Please note, we're going to play this as a video. Please note that the sound is a bit low on the video, so it may help to turn up your volume and turn on your captions. And so now it's my privilege to turn it over to Sir Rob Behrens. Give me 1 second here.
Morning from an unusually sunny London in England, and I'm speaking to you to celebrate Ombuds Day in 2024. And isn't it lovely to have something good to think about and dwell on in this challenging and difficult world that we live in? And we have a lot to celebrate because there are ombuds in 150 countries around the world, each with their distinct approach to resolving conflicts and doing it in a principled and honourable way. And this diversity is one of the key things that not only has to be celebrated, but used. So being an ombuds, as you know, is a lonely job. We have to learn from others, we have to listen to them, we have to adopt their best practice where it's appropriate for us. And given the great diversity of practices, that's no real difficulty, but it requires judgment. Now, I've been an ombuds for the last 18 years, and most recently as UK National Ombuds. And like you, I would guess that the challenges that we face are becoming more difficult, not less difficult. And I can think of a number that probably you share with me. The first is the rise of populist cultures and politics, where people are prepared to be dishonest in getting messages across, and where the ombuds has to make judgments about whether or not this is relevant in disputes which are taking place. Secondly, the terrible wars that are taking place around the world, in the Middle East, in Russia and Ukraine, where the issue of human rights is central. And here I'm thinking of particularly my wonderful colleague in Ukraine, Dmytro Lubinets, who has the key role of returning children who were kidnapped by the Russians during the first invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and the magnificent work he's doing in trying to make that happen. There are also issues in the UK of poor service and maladministration, the Windrush generation of West Indian UK citizens who were threatened with expulsion from the UK because their rights were traduced by the British government, and the 11,000 avoidable deaths a year in the National Health Service caused by not listening to patients, by simply not following appropriate practice, which needs to be brought to account. So we have a lot to think about, and we have a lot to think about how to apply solutions. And of these, Ombuds peer review is one, but the application of artificial intelligence is another. And here I'm glad to see that you're having a discussion about this, which following this video, I look forward to hearing the results. Of course, AI is excellent in terms of its capacity to make us think more critically about how to prioritize cases, how to apply algorithms to make sure there is justice, and how to reduce waiting times. But there are also challenges which are problems in terms of taking us away from human contact and making sure there is appropriate accountability in what we do as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. So it's difficult and challenging, and I look forward to hearing what you're doing. I'm coming to the North America later this year. I look forward to seeing you, and I join you in celebrating Ombuds Day, a great day for us all. All the best. Good morning.
Well, Sir Rob Behrens, thank you again for that introduction and for your years of leadership to the ombuds profession. Your words about the recent history and path forward for ombuds were actually a great segue into our featured programming on artificial intelligence and ombuds work. First, though, quick hello and thank you for joining today's program, everyone. I'm Marcus Sturgio. I'm an ombuds at the Department of Labor and co-chair with Ryan Smith of the ABA Ombuds Day Subcommittee. I hope I can speak for or on behalf of Ryan and on behalf of other members of the Ombuds Day Subcommittee when I say that we're really glad you decided to help us celebrate ombuds on this most important day. I'm happy now to introduce everyone to our panelists who will headline the remainder of today's programming. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves in just a moment, but really quickly before we do that, just by way of background, and Ryan explained earlier that the subcommittee consists of a representative from each of 5 different ombuds groups, IOA, USOA, NASOP, COFO, and AOSC. So a big thanks to each of these ombuds groups and the members of the subcommittee who represented them and have collaborated for the past several months to coordinate today's program. So the subcommittee, after much deliberation, had decided that it wanted to sponsor a conversation about AI, one that was hopefully unique and also educational and inclusive of each of those many ombuds modalities that exist around the world, because there are several of them. So in the spirit of Ombuds Day, you'll hear today from classical, also sometimes referred to as traditional ombuds. You'll hear from advocate ombuds, and you'll hear from organizational ombuds. Some of them work in government, others work in higher education, and others in healthcare. So we have a diverse array of ombuds who you'll be hearing from today, and we're referring to them for today's conversation as reactors, because the basic idea is that a facilitator, who I'll also have the pleasure of introducing in just a moment, will lead a discussion about AI and then share a few workplace scenarios related to AI. And then the reactors will react. They'll react with thoughts, they'll react with concerns, if there are any, ideas that they have, implications for them as practitioners, implications for the populations they serve as ombuds. So we hope that the concept is one that you'll find interesting and that the panelists' reactors' representation of those different sectors and ombuds models will contribute to an enlightening conversation. So let's go ahead and introduce our panel of reactors. You see their faces here on the screen already. So what I'll do is just maybe by first name, I'll point to each of you one at a time and give you a chance to introduce yourselves to the group. So Sharon, if you don't mind, if we start with you.
Sure thing. Hi, good afternoon, Marcus. Good afternoon, Ryan, and everyone on the Ombuds Day Committee. I'm Sharon Asar. I'm the Deputy Ombudsman with the CFPB Ombudsman's Office. The CFPB is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's a federal financial regulator. And in the CFPB Ombudsman's Office, we are a statutory office. We're an externally facing ombuds. And we assist the public, and the public includes, of course, consumers, companies, consumer and industry groups, as well as other members of the public with possible process issues that they may experience as they engage with the CFPB. In addition to my role at the CFPB Ombudsman's Office, I also participate in the Coalition of Federal Ombudsmen and also the Federal AI Community of Practice. Thank you again for the opportunity to join.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Next, Brian.
Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Green. I am the Associate Ombuds and Director of Programs at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, where I practice as an organizational ombuds. So that's internally facing and focused on helping our community through neutral and informal processes, confidential processes to address conflicts and concerns. Our population, again, is higher education. We're a R1 university with a medical campus or medical school, public health, and a number of other colleges and graduate schools. And we serve all of those faculty, staff, and students. And so we see a variety of concerns particular to those different constituents. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you, Brian. And Patricia.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patricia Hunter. I am a long-term care ombudsman. I operate the state long-term care ombudsman in Washington State, based in Federal Way. We are an external facing organization. I also represent the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs, known as NASOP. We have state ombudsmen in every state across the U.S. We serve approximately 3 million vulnerable adults. Our authority is under federal mandate, the Older Americans Act. We also promote and protect the rights of long-term care residents. We do that through education, through direct advocacy, information sharing, and then on a macro level, we do policy making. So very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Jean-Marc.
I am the ombudsman for Canada Post, which is the Canadian equivalent of the USPS. So we serve all Canadians, all businesses. We are externally facing, and I have implemented AI so far twice. Once at Canada Post, once in our current ombudsman office. And we are working on implementing AI in a different spot, again, in the ombudsman office. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you again, Jean-Marc. And now to you, Guy.
Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Guy Weber. I'm the Deputy Ombuds at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, also known as NGA, where I work with our population is government employees, contractors, and military employees. So we're basically, as we say, we're ombuds there for everybody. It is organizational work, though, because it is internal. And my other role I want to mention is I am also the co-vice chair of the Coalition of Federal Ombudsmen, also known as COFO. So I serve in that role, too. And very happy to be here today. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Guy. And thank you again to each of our panelists, reactors, not only for those introductions, but also for the thoughts and reactions that you'll soon share as part of the panel. So thank you for your huge contributions to today's program. And last but not least, I'm also delighted to welcome our facilitator for today's event, someone who is uniquely qualified to lead a conversation about AI and to facilitate dialogue about the impacts and implications for ombuds. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Stephen Thomas, who is the Assistant Dean for STEM Education, Teaching and Learning at Michigan State University. He advises on technology policy, creates professional development opportunities for faculty, and develops curriculum for a wide range of student backgrounds. In these capacities, he's wrestled with the potential of generative AI in different fields and will use these experiences to facilitate our conversation with ombuds regarding the opportunities and challenges presented by these new and continuously evolving technologies. So, Stephen, thank you so very much for joining us for today's program and facilitating this important conversation. I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcus. I have to say, so like as you were reading that, I feel like the main message that I wanted to start this with is that I am not an expert in AI. And I think you've just like undermined that argument a little bit. But when I was talking with Ryan, I keep coming back to this idea that I am not an expert. And if you talk to an expert, they will tell you I am not an expert. But what I do is I wrestle a lot with these concepts. And so when I heard that you all were interested in having a discussion, I was actually very intrigued, mostly because the more that we hear about how people are using it and how people are thinking about it, it really fleshes out our own understanding and our own ways that we think that we might use the tool. So I'm really excited to be engaging with the reactors as well as with your community today. So in general, the outline is we have three kind of case studies that I'm just going to lay out briefly. And it's going to cover the idea of the capabilities of AI, how we might expand the type of work that we do with AI, and then what are the ethical considerations that we need to balance as we're doing that work. Not to say that ethics won't tie into, any specific piece, but those are in general the buckets that we're hoping to kind of address. And I'm going to try to keep the case study short so that we can hear mostly from the reactors. And we also have a few questions for you, the audience, in order to frame some pieces. So don't be shocked if we're all of a sudden like, okay, now we're going to ask you a question. So be prepared. They're multiple choice and they're anonymous, so no worries. Let me just share my slides real quick. So as Marcus outlined, I have kind of these, I'm sure many of you wear many different hats. I have three in general that I wear, and they look at professional development, curriculum development, and academic support. So how do we have policies and work for the betterment of faculty and staff and students? And so I'll give you some perspective. Some of the case studies come from each of those different perspectives. Normally, when we talk about AI, we have a wide range of people's experiences with AI. So I usually like to just start off with just a way to think about it. And again, if you're an expert in AI, this is where it'll come out of like, oh, yes, he is not an expert. But this is how I think about it. And I hope that this is helpful for many of you who are out there who are wrestling with these concepts. So one way that you might think about AI is that it's like a robotic library assistant. So you have this huge data set or books that are available to the AI. You make a query of it. It gathers all of that information and then pieces together, based on statistics and probability, a response to you. So we're going to show you some examples of text, but I've given you an example of a visual because I think it actually helps to kind of see what the output is compared to the reality. So we have a structure on the campus of Michigan State University called Beaumont Tower. It is on the left. And when I asked AI to generate me an image of Beaumont Tower, it created the thing on the right. So as you can see, they are not identical, and yet they are highly informed by the vast amount of data that are out there. So I think what's important to realize is that AI is not going out and picking out a specific piece of information to give you, like a Google search. It's actually creating a conglomerate from all of the sources that it has. This will come into play in some of the things that we see and talk about with regards to its capabilities. So now we're getting into our first audience participation piece. So Jen, would you please launch the first poll? And I'll read it to you while that's going. So how comfortable are you with the idea of using generative AI to assist in ombuds related tasks, such as case generation, summaries, or translation? You could fill out the poll. We'll give you a few seconds, and I will tell you I'm a notorious educator who says you have 10 seconds to fill this out, and I give you 5.
Stephen, just to confirm, are you seeing the live results?
Yeah, actually, I am seeing just the poll.
Okay, great. Let me know when to end it, and I will.
Let's go ahead and wrap that up. So I think this is also important for our reactors to see of like understanding how we can also gauge our responses to what we see. You all are a cautious group. Hat tip to you all, with the majority, right, being neutral and still unsure. With a, it's actually a pretty good normal distribution around neutral. Okay, well, so that means that's great. We have a wide range of where people are sitting right now. So some of what we are going to cover is going to be uncomfortable, and some of it might be in a very familiar hat for you. So thanks for participating in that. So our first scenario is thinking about how I call it top-down advice with bottom-up complaints. So when AI came out, our faculty and staff were very interested in what is the administration's, what are their rules or perspective or values that we have to follow. And what our leadership came back with was, this is actually something that faculty need to go off and work on their disciplines in. So as a discipline, figure out how AI should impact that discipline, and then come back and work that into your curriculum. And basically what I got from faculty was a lot of side eye of like, you want me to do what in addition to all of the other things that I have to do? So I feel like in general, the idea that people were working with is I don't have time to do this. And some are not sure that it's worthwhile, and some are, actually they represent the normal distribution that we just saw with your all's response. But what was interesting is that at the same time, we saw articles like this by Owen Kichizo Terry in the Chronicle of Higher Education, where it's basically, it's from a student perspective. And the argument is, we're using AI in ways that you don't know that we're using AI. So I think what this sets up is, even if people are not ready to have the discussion, other people who are involved in your work are having this discussion. And so if you're not having it, you are potentially going to be at risk. So I know that when we come from a wide range of people who have a wide range of interest in AI, some of you may not have explored the tool. And so in this first piece, we're kind of looking at the capabilities of AI. So I just put together a few pieces of output to give you a sense. There's going to be a wall of text here. You don't have to read everything, but just get a sense of the type of output. So basically, I asked AI, I'm only familiar with my ombudsperson and office. So like, obviously I have high quality ombuds people like Ryan Smith that I can lean on. But I was like, okay, so what should I be talking to this community? It came up and said, oh, these are 9 things that you should have in your talk. I said, that's great, but can you expand on points 3 and 4? It said, yes, when you're talking about opportunities for ombuds with generative AI, you should be sure to mention efficient conflict resolution, communication assistance. And then when you're talking about challenges and ethical considerations, talk about confidentiality risks. Said, that's great. What is the range of ombuds that I might experience? And it said, well, in general, there are 7 types. It gave me definitions of each of those. And I said, okay, well, can you give me, let's take NGO ombuds, because I know nothing about NGO ombuds. I said, give me, what do these opportunities and risks look like for that group? It laid those out. And then I said, okay, well, can you give me a case study for an NGO ombuds that I would likely encounter? It created a case summary. In this case, it's about a person who's filed a complaint alleging unfair workload distribution, and it's set in West Africa. It included then a respondent's position, a mediation attempt, an officer's observation, recommendations, and the next scheduled appointment. I said, that's great. Can you also generate me an image that captures this summary? And it gave me this image of a person who's feeling isolated from their work colleagues, as well as an unnecessary workload. Now, realizing that they didn't go out and pull an image, right? It created this image based on this entry. I then said, okay, well, that's a lot of text. Can you summarize it for me? It summarized it for me. And then I said, okay, well, this is taking place in West Africa. Can you translate it into Yoruba so that it can be then disseminated? And it did. Okay, so it did all of this within 5 to 7 minutes. And I just want to say, like, I am not an expert in ombuds. I am not familiar with West African languages. So my ability to like evaluate these resources, and even looking at the picture, there are many conversations to be had about like what does this picture represent? There's many conversations to be had, but I just wanted to kind of give a sense of the type of work that can be generated in a very short amount of time. So the question from this case study of, when we have top-down, leaders that are basically saying, as a discipline, you need to figure out what's going on so that you can come back and work that into the curriculum. There are these underlying questions of what work should Gen AI do, in this case, for your case, in the world of ombuds, and who is doing work that can guide your decisions. And there are sub questions here that we can discuss, and reactors should feel free to take any part of this that you would like to discuss or that resonates with your work. Why don't we go around, have the reactors give a few thoughts, and then we can build upon what's come out after we've heard, after everyone's had a moment to share their piece if they would like. Thoughts?
Hey, I'll share my first reaction when I saw that was, hey, that is a great synthesis, and I'm amazed how fast I imagine it came up. But I also often think in Ombuds work, we're all about helping people develop options. And my concern when I saw that was, wow, that looks like, hey, if I was the visitor, you just gave me the answer. Like, this is it. I can go down this checklist, do it, or the Ombuds even. If, hey, this is what I'm going to recommend to my visitor. So my immediate concern was, wow, it's so simple and so, kind of right there that people might, it could be easy for someone to fall in and say, hey, I'm going to the Ombuds AI, genius, and it just gave me what to do. But that goes against what I see one of our fundamental roles is, and that's to generate options with folks and help them really think through what's the best one for them and let them make the choice. So that's kind of my initial reaction. It's like, wow, maybe that process could really be short-circuited. Thanks.
Yeah, similarly,
by someone who has no experience. Just tossing out. Sorry, Sharon, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, thank you, Stephen. Similar to Guy, it's the going through together with the ombuds the possibilities, the options is important. To that extent, the human component in the ombuds field is rather critical. Notwithstanding the really detailed example that was given by the AI in this scenario, at the same time, there are nuances that the AI program may or may not get about a particular organization, about the personalities that are involved, et cetera. So, if there is I hate to say a generic solution or set of solutions offered by the AI program, they may not be applicable to a particular organization or personalities. They could really get the visitor sideways and could be a problem. But that's not to say that, it doesn't, act as a brainstorming tool, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. Patricia.
And to build upon Sharon's comments, for the long-term care ombuds, we're working with a very vulnerable population living in nursing homes and other types of settings. And the thing about that example, I was like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But I didn't see in the description, did the AI recommend sort of validating Samuel's experience? Right. I know that there are different types of ombuds and being biased or not may matter in your work. In my work as an advocate ombuds, I am person-centered. and I'm going to believe his experience and I'm going to validate him. And as a manager, nowhere in that description did it say, take care of him. Like, what does he need? What choices does he have? What would he like to see happen? That voice, I think, is missing. And I think AI isn't there yet to pick that up. So for my work, it would not be significantly meaningful. And then the question that I wanted to actually answer was, who would I turn to if I decide to use AI? Well, I'm going to turn to ombudsman, and I'm going to turn to the people that we serve, right? I'm going to turn to long-term care residents to see their opinion. Do they want us to use it? So there you go.
Thank you. Those are some great points. Brian.
Yeah, thanks. As an organizational ombuds, this is, I think, the question that is really the number one, or one of the number one questions that's really challenging our profession, because we need to be able to articulate what it is that organizational ombuds functionally do within the organizations that we serve. And there's a phrase that the sociologist Max Weber refers to, this iron cage as this kind of metaphor for what, industrialization and rationalization and bureaucratization does to stifle creativity and individuality. And I kind of contrast that with what part of the role of being an organizational ombuds is to help our visitors, not just by presenting them with intellectual options or things that they can consider, but also an antidote to that iron cage, a sense that they are being truly seen and truly heard, in a way that is, I think we are not, a lot of the things that make us feel truly seen and truly heard are kind of mammalian qualities, right? They're kind of these almost biological processes that we're only beginning to understand, even in psychology, these really embodied things. And I think part of the answer for organizational ombuds to be able to respond to this challenge of, being able to generate wonderful options, even if you have an AI that's particular to an organization, being able to give the correct textbook answer of something, is it meeting that human need? And I think that's a question for us as ombuds.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Jean-Marc.
We've done a lot of work on AI. We got AI people flown in here, and we spent months working with them to understand where can AI be used in the ombudsman office. So we're probably early out of the gate overall. So we're not even looking at generative AI, which we find is cute in the media. It's fun, it's entertaining. We find that irrelevant. So the AI that we think is relevant is the AI engines that can make a decision on our behalf. Make a decision, not generate text or generate images, but make a decision. So our conclusion was that AI can understand a case, can summarize it, can code it, can create an investigative plan. It can create all the questions you can ask. It can look at options. It can weigh options. And I think it can identify all the relevant policies that are at play. If trained properly, so AI engines have to be trained. So trained properly, we think they can do like a significant portion of the work we do. The place that we don't think it's going to happen in the foreseeable future is your topic, the soft skills. So we don't think AI can show empathy. We don't think it can detect when someone is uncomfortable. When you do conflict resolution or you question people, sometimes people are uncomfortable. You can feel it. AI can't do that. When someone gives you a bit of a white lie, well, that's not consistent with what I heard in the last. AI can't detect that stuff. Or, when you talk to someone and they come in with a partner and you ask questions and you can feel you've hit a nerve and there's discomfort, AI just can't. So can't detect any of it. So all of that soft skills, we don't see that coming in the foreseeable future, but any kind of work from an ombudsman's office, whether it's intake or investigation or the legal people, if it's a decision, I think there's a lot of potential. But clearly, I think there's a limit. So that's why for us, when we play with AI, we don't want AI to make a customer-facing interaction. We want AI to be an assistant to an investigator, an assistant to the intake function, an assistant to the legal folks. So we want this to be internal facing, but not yet customer facing.
Great. Thank you, Jean-Marc. Guy.
Yeah, to follow on that code, something I've been thinking about is often as an ombuds, a critical moment is that first, half hour to hour and talking with somebody. And I think, Jean-Marc was just talking about some of those, hey, the white lie or the visual clues, someone's uncomfortable. There's so many questions can be generated by our reaction to the visitor there. There may be a day AI gets there, but I don't think it's there yet. And even before I was thinking about, actual kind of, physical reactions or things you can see, it's also, I often think when a visitor comes in, they often have a story to tell, and they've thought about it. Hey, I'm going to the ombuds, and some people think we're a little more formal, so they want to get their story ready. It's kind of got a nice script going. And then part of our art is to have them unpack that, to try to get to what's really going on. Because often what's on the surface is on the surface. Maybe it isn't everything there. But that's where I have a little concern that I think about it, because AI it's really good at generating, hey, here's solutions. But if I come in as a visitor and I don't have that time to kind of distill and work, kind of pull that problem apart, I might get to some solutions. Hey, that looks really good. And people aren't comfortable with conflict in general. So, hey, if all I have to do is these 3 things or 5 things, it's easy to jump to that. But I think we could potentially miss a big step if we don't, if we go to AI in that intake. So, Jean-Marc, I'm with you on that. I think there's a good help on the backside, but right now I don't see it on the front side as well. Thank you.
Okay, so some things that I heard. One was around nuances, and like when we're talking and we're getting all these generalities out of it, really, where are the nuances? I want to toss out that like you do have the ability to upload specifics to the engines to then have it incorporate those ideas into its answer. But maybe that's not enough. You also talked about, so Guy, like your first piece of like, where's the answer? Like, how did, we get the best answer out of it. And what I didn't show you, which I think is because partly it's rare for a prompter to actually remember this. You can actually input something and say, where am I wrong? Or how can I improve this? And you actually get things that can counter confirmation bias. It can help you to widen your perspective. So, and actually, we'll show you an example in the second case study that will tie into that. Jean-Marc mentioned that his team has already brought in experts and has started to have conversations. I just wanted to identify, like, part of this question is where should one look in order for leadership about how to think about this? So when you hear that type of thing, you should be like, oh, those are places that I might turn to in order to see what's being done and how it's being done. We did have some questions also that were posted in the Q&A. I don't know that we'll always have time to mine that for ideas. But so one of the participants noted about AI tutors empowering the visitor. And I just wanted to kind of talk on this point. Like the way that we're mostly framing it so far is how AI will transform the ombuds office or the ombuds role. But also there is also this piece of what happens when the people that you are working with also have access to AI, and how does it transform their interaction with you? Right. So what happens if in preparation for a meeting with you, they're able to go through and have a dialogue with an AI in order to better prepare for an interaction? Is it a way of de-escalation? What are ways that it might actually play in that role? Yeah, Sharon and then Brian.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you. When you just mentioned about the visitor to the ombuds office preparing by utilizing AI themselves, it made me think of patients with doctors. Sometimes doctors, they express frustration that patients will utilize Dr. Google, as they say, not to name a particular search engine, but to go, and find an answer that the patient may or may not understand fully themselves. But at the same time, it does allow, for the visitor to have some additional information that they may not otherwise have in interacting with the doctor or ombuds in this case.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, I mean, at least with large language models, LLMs, I think the way that I think about these is as a kind of rhetorical calculator, where it's not the substance that it's generating that is what you're really, because it might hallucinate that substance. It might come up with even within an internal system, it might give you the technically correct answer, but without the context or whatever. What it's great at is being used dialectically to think through problems and to challenge assumptions and question, biases and all those things, Stephen, that you suggested. And so, frankly, I see this both as an option, a great training tool for anyone who's in a care service or a caring profession to to develop their own skills in this area. And I would actually welcome a visitor coming to our office, having worked through this and have some language and some common things and some strategies that they want to try out. That would help me take them from where they're usually starting, which is I'm very frustrated because I'm not being heard by problem X or by person X. And I can get that person and a visitor to hear, but if they're coming in and they've already worked through some options, that's great. Let's take those and run with them. So I think that actually is a great use case.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Jean-Marc.
Thank you. Those customers today, depending on the industry, they're already in touch with AI. I'm just going to use a silly example. 10 years ago, when you were going on a big business website, you could chat with a chatbot, right? We've all heard about chatbot. The latest generation of chatbot, I would say 3-4 years, they're all tied to an AI engine. So the power you get as a user to interact and learn before going to the ombudsman just by being there, it's already there. Like, to give you a sense, at Canada Post, when you print all of the policies and procedures, it's 10,000 pages, 10,000. Like, there's no one human brain that can memorize 10,000 pages. So when a customer goes on the Canada Post website and they ask question with the AI engine in there, they're already learning a lot, just like Dr. Google. And, they realize either it's self-serve, I get it, or when they come to us, they're better educated, they're more aware. So having customers deal with AI first before coming to me, it's as dangerous as Dr. Google, because I do that as well when I go to the doctor. I'm horrible, but I think it's fine. The fear is we've learned that AI learns sarcasm. So we had this AI bot that I implemented, the last one, and the AI bot asked the customer, really? Like, it has questions that are like, I live at this address, I've had this issue. The AI bot says, really? So AI is still new. AI can learn sarcasm, or it can build a racial bias. Which is like a whole new world. But to answer your question, I think customers dealing with AI before coming to us, I think it's already happening in multiple places. And it's the danger of Dr. Google. But I would say I will come having a slightly educated customer before they come to us.
Okay, I will point out, Jean-Marc, that you did say there are dangers to Dr. Google, but I use it.
Yes, exactly. I said that.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that will be our response, right? Is that we may not think it's the best, and yet it will be our reality of dealing with people coming in that situation. Just laying that I'm going to actually move us on to the next case study. We can always loop back if we have time at the end back to some of these additional points. So if any of you have interacted with a biologist or a biology class in the last 80 years, you'll be familiar with the Krebs cycle because we as biologists love our Krebs cycle. I don't know why, we just do. But I use this as my next example because I was engaging with the Teach Access group. It's a national organization that looks at how do you teach accessibility that's embedded in the disciplines. And so to prepare for that, I pulled up and I was like, okay, I need a lesson for the Krebs cycle. Can you make me a lesson on the Krebs cycle? It did. I was like, that looks good. And then I said, okay, I need a lesson for a blind student. And it gave me a lesson. And I was like, okay, well, that looks good. That looks very similar to the one before. And I said, what exactly did you do in this case to make this appropriate for a blind student? And the output that came from that was that it changed the descriptive language, making it more illustrative to explain the concepts. It avoided visual reference. It focused on real world examples. And it streamlined the information so that the individual would not have screen reader fatigue. If you had asked a typical faculty member, they would say, yes, I prepared for a blind student in that the material that I created can be read by a screen reader. No faculty member would be able to craft a lesson that had all of these components. It wouldn't even cross their mind about some of these pieces about how to actually make an appropriate accommodation for someone, and they would not be able to do it at scale. So when we look at, to me, like this is also very similar to that point that we made in the last section about giving the AI something and saying, what am I doing wrong here? This is a way of expanding upon our understanding of what are the capabilities of any of our tasks if we just ask, as opposed to like, do this task for me and it outputs. This is actually a way for us to improve our capacity. So for our second audience question, Jen, can you launch the second question, please? To what extent do you think generative AI can help expand personalized solution in ombuds cases? For example, accommodating unique needs. Again, we'll give you 20 seconds to register your answer. I was told that you should hum the Jeopardy theme music, and that will actually give you the appropriate time. So I'm hoping that I did not speed that up. Jen, can you close the poll and give us the results? You all are hopelessly normally distributed. Yes. All right. Well, we have a wide range here. So we'll see how our reactors feel. When we think about what services might you be able to offer that are more individualized to more people, how could AI broaden Ombuds perspectives? Could it expand approaches to resolving conflicts? But also, what are the boundaries for AI use when customizing suggestions for sensitive cases? How much can ombuds rely on AI for proposing solutions outside their expertise?
I'd say that the
Thomas?
first thing that comes to mind for me on that is that if you are going to go outside your expertise, there would be nothing wrong with sharing with the visitor. Hey, I'm going to employ this AI tool to come up with some ideas that I might, my experience might not take me to. Would you be willing to try that? So it's full. I'm not going to present it as my own, coming directly from me, but this is something I've gone out and found for you. Would you be interested in hearing that? I think with the positive there, you as always, asking permission as an ombuds. Can I do this for you? Help you with this? I think there could be some good use for that. And you can also, and it's also with AI, you could also bound it. You could work with the visitor to bound that request so that it is appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Guy.
Yeah. No, I guess for me, this goes back to the point about using it dialectically, not substantively, as a way of challenging my own perspectives on things, and especially when that comes to, you know, a situation that I haven't encountered before, or a particular set of experiences that I'm unfamiliar with, or haven't encountered as often. But again, really, there's a kind of humility, I think, that it's beneficial to engage AI with, rather than going to AI for some kind of output answer, to treat it as, these are questions that I have. Help me work through it in this kind of dialoguing manner, and that will help me sharpen my understanding better. And I actually think, I mean, I come down on the scale of, on that Likert scale, I'm definitely on the one side of, I think that this has got a huge potential to broaden our perspectives and expand approaches to areas that I hadn't even considered before, because I hadn't engaged in that process or didn't have a real way to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, Jean-Marc. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, a really, really difficult question. So ChatGPT, it's kind of a generic, all-encompassing tool. It's tied to a vast world of knowledge, and people use it for day-to-day stuff, or students use it to generate papers, stuff, or images. But it's connected to just general knowledge. What we see coming, like really, really fast, we see all these companies developing industry-specific AI for doctors, AI for nurses, AI for lawyers, AI for people who manage building, AI for like a variety of industries and functions and engineers, but it's AI specific. I don't think we will ever be big enough as a sector, the ombudsman, to have an ombudsman specific AI. I don't think so, but it's possible. So that's why we had to build it custom in our case. So essentially what we did is we want AI to make that decision. We've identified the decision, and then we fed thousands of decisions we had made in the past around this topic. And that's how the AI engine learned. And after going through a couple of thousands of our decision, it can now make the decision for us. And there's a dial of probability. I'm not going to go there, but it can really, really perform. The question is about, can it provide other options, other stuff? My view is, the way we use AI is we're feeding it our own decisions. So I'm not sure it will have the ability to be creative and look at other options. But I think the moment there is an industry lawyer app or an industry ombudsman app that comes in with a much more vast, like a larger knowledge of ombudsman stuff, I think that's where we may see AI being creative and coming up with other options. So I would say a short term, if you build it custom, I'm not sure, but the moment it starts to be supplied by the industry, where the source of knowledge is very specific, but also broader than just one company, I think it could become really, really really interesting. The place where, I'm really nervous about using AI with customers directly because, it's fine when you deal with a chatbot or customer service because you're allowed to make a mistake. But, giving ombudsman complainants access to AI, as an ombudsman, I want all of my decisions and recommendations to be like perfect, like banking quality decisions. So I'm nervous about giving customers direct access to AI to solve their own ombudsman related problems, just because I'm not sure we're there yet or the industry is there yet. And the image and the brand I want to convey as an ombudsman, which is the perfect decision, the best recommendation, I'm just a little bit nervous at this point. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jean-Marc. Patricia.
So I'm very nervous about external facing AI with the population that long-term care ombudsmen serve. We're working with a population of older adults. We're working with families who are in a situation of emergency and they're trying to find housing and care for their loved ones. And so they're basically in crisis. And for at least the last decade, maybe more, I mean, we've got, people going onto the internet, and basically searching for a nursing home, and they're inundated by AI marketing materials. Come to this place. This is great. We're great, right? So the reliability is just, it's false advertising in general. In most cases, in my opinion, very opinionated on that. Internal facing, I really like Guy's answer in that if this is a sensitive case, I'm going to talk to that person or to the client and say, would this work for you if I utilized AI? I'm not sure if it's going to work, but perhaps this would give us better communication, or maybe I could better understand your situation by using it internally. But I would ask for permission first and present it as, this isn't perfect, but let's give it a try together. And I would want that sort of agreement, and it be person-centered and person-driven.
Patricia, thanks for that. I think you're also starting to bring up the idea of transparency, which we'll also touch on in the last case. Sharon, and then we have some comments I'd like to loop in from the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. This piece about the relying on AI for the expertise of the AI, I think it's encouraging what Jean-Marc was mentioning, that there may be some industry-specific AIs coming into development, and hopefully, potentially, there would be some verification, some level of verification. I think many of us have heard about, and I think someone in the questions referenced the rather infamous situation, an attorney, I believe it was in the news, that put together a brief utilizing AI, and there were some of the citations were incorrect. So, excuse me, when there's a high stakes situation, and if you're relying on expertise, it may be important now where the AI, if it's trained more generally as opposed to, say, industry specific, to do some, maybe think kind of like a journalist, like fact checking multiple sources, that type of thing, when it comes to these very high stakes type scenarios. But it is encouraging to hear that there's more focused AIs perhaps being brought into the fore. Thank you.
Yeah. Sharon, and that actually ties into one of the questions that someone in the Q&A brought up about, in this presentation, are we differentiating between AI types of predictive value versus generative value? And I would say that it's been kept broad to, we are not distinguishing. I would say most of our talk is actually on the generative piece, because we see more of the general public using that, and also those tools are readily available to also people to do their work, as well as for consumers to prepare using that type of tool. We also had in the Q&A people who were talking about, thanks for bringing up the idea of nuance, because They have seen AI products come across their desk that they recognize as being AI and that aren't nuanced enough in order to make to be as effective as they should be. But I wanted to raise up also this concept of the human AI human sandwich. It's not an official term, but it is this concept that as a human, you come and you craft the prompt, you get AI output, and then as a human, you use and interpret and massage that to be appropriate for your product. So just saying that taking AI products and spinning them out as like totally done, ready to go products is not necessarily how people could use them or maybe should use them. But I also wanted to highlight this one example in the Q&A. I'm just going to read it straight. So I have a mental illness. There are times I have more questions than quote unquote normal, and people reject me. Do you think ombuds would connect parties who normally may get rejected as difficult, even by the ombuds, to the AI for more support than the ombuds cannot give? The AI can hopefully never get overwhelmed and burnt out and upset with the party like a person would. You know, when we're talking about the variety of audiences that we might have that engage with AI and the variety of ways that people might have needs that maybe extend beyond what is typically allowed for, how do we think about that, Patricia?
Well, I was going to, in response to the question, to Dan's question, I would say again how I responded earlier, and Guy responded. I would involve him, and you want to try AI and see how this feels. I personally get really frustrated when I have a chatbot customer service, and can never speak to a human being. So I think it's really about the individual and what's going to work for them. Ethically, as a social worker, I would need some consult by someone who has expertise in the area as to, what's going on with me. Because I would hate to see ombuds just, push off those people who are deemed difficult, and you could easily slip into these bias type scenarios. Who is difficult? A person of color, person who's a, lower economic status. I mean, is this really what we want to do, is push off people to AI? So I would start with, how is this going to help the individual, and want to involve them in that.
Thanks, Brian.
I just want to echo, I don't think I would ever push off or refer someone to an AI generative tool, other than to suggest, hey, this is a tool that you might find useful in this sort of process way. But the need that you're articulating is, you are exactly the kind of person in an organization who needs to be seen in their full humanity. And for me to push that, a person who has whatever needs, special, unique identities and experiences and needs, to deflect that would actually be, to me, very dangerous. That would be a, in some ways, dehumanizing thing to say, oh, okay, you're a person that's not in the normal distribution of people that I interact with every day, so you get to talk to this computer program. So yeah, I would not push people off.
Yeah, thank you. Guy.
Yeah, I would follow with, I don't think I can ever envision pushing somebody off to just work with the model, but a group, and believe me, this is just a thought process here, but as I think about, one of our jobs is communication, and helping, I always think as an ombuds, how to help people tell their story. And I would say where I work with a fair number of neurodiverse people that are really super smart, but maybe not so smart and now smart might not be the right word, but they have challenges with regular communication with coworkers. I'm a little curious about this whole thing. Is there might be a way, an opening here would there be a way to help, both sides of that equation, both the neurodiverse and those that are not neurodiverse, find a way to better communicate with some sort of AI intermediary? Don't know that it would work, but I thought there may be some really good options there. And I would never put someone into that without their knowledge. I mean, they've got that transparency has to be there. But I do think, and I'm thinking of that group again, I think many of them recognize they have that communication challenge. I think would welcome a tool that would help them. So I think there may be some good uses for this, perhaps.
Yes, I was going to save this example till the end, but what we've seen on campus is we are implementing AI tutors for things like mathematics. And when signing up students, one of the stories I heard, we actually heard numerous stories, was how excited the student was that they could get their questions in math answered without having microaggressions. They didn't say microaggressions. They said, I won't have comments like, oh, I learned that in middle school, or you don't know that. And just tossing out this idea that like sometimes people may use these types of tools to get the services or answers that they need without having to expose, in this case, their lack of understanding or be vulnerable in a spot where they don't feel like they would be supported. So I just wanted to toss out, like, like what does it look like to have tools available for people to navigate based on their comfort level, as well as what we think might be best as individuals? Because, and from my perspective, no help room should ever make a student feel that way. And yet there are. And so is this a way of actually catching those individuals to make sure that we have a wider range of support? So I want to move on to our last case study real quick. Thanks for all of these thoughts in the Q&A and for our reactors. I just wanted to toss out, because one of the things that came up in conversations was this idea of ChatGPT as being a black box and you're not sure what the thinking is. So as an ombuds, how do you determine whether or not something was ethical? And I just wanted to say that the new 4.01 output, I had it review the ombuds example, and basically it said, well, these are ways that you could improve it. And it said, you need to work on anonymizing personal information and sensitive details. And I said, okay, well, what was your thought behind that? Like, you could actually, it has a click down, and it showed me these were the steps that it took in order to make those determinations. And they had a longer description. My point with this is not that it solved all this problem and now we don't have to worry about that as a problem, but just to talk about the constant evolution of the tools and the ideas, and probably the need for continued engagement in order to understand what are the capabilities of. Okay, so the last case study I wanted to toss out to you is this idea of one person's utopia is another one's wasteland. These are images that I generated with AI for a piece of curriculum. And what we find is that students, when you ask them, we'd like you to make something with generative AI, occasionally you get some who are like, no, I don't want to. I don't actually believe that that's ethical. So their argument, right, is that this tool was populated without permissions from numerous groups, right? So from artists and designers, and you can see the list here, and that the tool is also impacting and threatening the livelihoods of those groups. So we have to come up with alternative exercises for those students to be like, okay, well, here's, again, the learning outcomes that we're going for. You can use more traditional means. But what this sets up with is this weighing between the ethics of the students, I'm not sure what it means, or themselves, but so of the faculty themselves. So either faculty or students may be ethically against the tool. But also, we know that students are most likely going to need to know about AI in their future jobs. As you all are wrestling with it, they will have to wrestle with it in their future jobs. So what does it mean for an institution of higher learning to prepare students for that if we don't do that, right? So like, how do you weigh those two things at the same time? So similarly, I imagine that in the role of an ombuds, you have to weigh your personal ethics the ethics of your constituents, the ethics of your organization, and society as a whole. I saved the easy questions for last, so but let's actually poll our audience. I'm ready for my normal distribution around neutral. So Jen, can you launch the question? So how should ombuds handle conflicting ethical viewpoints regarding the use of generative AI, especially when individuals or groups are morally opposed to it? Okay, Jen, can you close that out? And thank you. Oh, our first bimodal. Yay. Interesting. All right. I'm not sure how to think about that. Anyone from the so our questions to the reactors, and feel free to also loop in these results. But what ethical considerations need to be put on the table, and how do you balance your ethics, your organization, and your constituents? Or what does transparency look like? Patricia alluded to it earlier. Who potentially is not part of this discussion that needs to be? Yeah, Jean-Marc.
The so you know the transparency, that's the portion that scares me the most, or so far. So when I look at this AI conversation, I think has two segments. The first one is, how can we use AI in our own ombudsman office? And I think that's interesting. It's worth looking at, interesting, bordering entertaining. The place where I'm scared is, what if the companies we support, so the school we support, the bank we support, they start using AI. They start using AI in their customer-facing decision, and the customers say, "I think this is unfair." And I don't like it, and I want to go to the ombudsman. I think the decision that was rendered is absolutely unfair, blah, blah, blah. There's a bias in it. And we come in as ombudsman, and we have to look at the decision was made where AI was used. And as you guys probably know or will know, AI is a black box. We don't know how it makes decisions. Like if I use the example of Dr. Thomas at the beginning, this university tower, here's the real one, and then it generated one. Well, if you ask the AI engine, the ChatGPT in this case, how did you generate this tower? The answer is we don't know. Like we just don't know. Or when ChatGPT was asked, generate a plan, generate this, and you come in as an investigator, how did you get to that decision? It's always, we don't know. It's a black box. So what I find difficult in the future for us is the same way we're asking how we can use it. All of the organizations we support, whether it's hospitals or schools or organizations, they're asking the same thing, and they're going to be using it. And the dilemma is, how do you investigate a customer complaint where the decision was made by AI? What does your investigation plan look like when it's a black box? You don't know how it made a decision. There's only 8 or 9 companies in the world that have an AI engine. Google has 2, Microsoft has 2, Amazon has 1, Facebook has 1, Meta, IBM has Watson, and Salesforce has Einstein. There's only less than 10. So, and they're all black boxes. So to me, the question of transparency with AI is really interesting. When we investigate something, AI was involved, and we don't know how the decision was made. So to me, that's the question of transparency is a fabulous question, and I don't have a good answer.
I'm sorry, but we require one. Sorry. Guy, how about you?
It's Mark. Part of my reaction when you said that, and understand I'm an organizational ombud, so I'm not dealing with the public. But often I'll work with visitors and say, do we have to get back to the absolute truth? I do need to hear your story, like what the discomfort is or what the conflict is. Or maybe using this example, a decision was rendered by some sort of automated process and you're uncomfortable with it, unhappy with it. All right, so that's our starting point. This is something you'd like to get to a different answer. You'd like to come out somewhere else on the, with a different outcome. All right, so let's work together to kind of help, develop a way, a way to possibly get to that other outcome. But I don't necessarily need to know the origin usually. Years ago I was teaching mediation. I remember working with a group of lawyers and they were like, well, we just need the facts, guy, and then we can mediate this. And I'm like, no, it's not about you. It's about the individuals that you're mediating. And we could spend all days actually getting down to is this a fact or not. So when my reaction is kind of like, I don't really know if I need to know what's in the deeper engine, so to speak. But I do know that the person visiting me was unhappy with it. So what is it? What are the options? What are the ways? What are the things we could do to help that individual, help that organization, help that decider come to a different decision? So
The example we use all the time internally, it's a fictitious example, but let's say I want to buy car insurance and home insurance. I go on this insurance website. It uses an AI engine. So it asks me a bunch of questions, blah, blah, blah. So I get my quote for my car insurance and my home insurance. But my neighbor who has the same car, same home, same neighborhood, same street, has a completely different quote. And I realize it. So I'm super upset. So I go to the ombudsman for this insurance company and say, you guys have to explain this. This sounds like you guys have a bias or racial bias, and it's unfair. And so the ombudsman, we're thinking if we're the ombudsman and we have to figure out, wow, how did it come to that decision when the next door neighbor seems to be like the standard decision? Like how do we approach it? The only way I'm thinking is to trash the decision and say, let's work with humans at the insurance company and try to rebuild what the right answer would be. But it begs the question about, oh my gosh, is it possible that AI has biases or racial biases or generational biases? So we use that as an example of how do we approach a situation where two different answers that should be the same are quite different, and we just don't know how it was made.
And Jean-Luc, I think that brings up too one of the things that Jean-Marc. So that scenario, if it came up, what are the tools? And this is beyond ombuds. This would be in the data science side. What are the ways that the engine can be made better? Because we as ombuds, we might identify a bias or we might bring something to light like that. So if we were to bring it, a responsible organization would take that and say, all right, understand, we think that you're seeing a bias here. Is there a way to go back and look at that? One of the things when I was first thinking about this topic is I asked someone who's quite an expert in data science, or in building the engines and the whole concept of AI. It's like, I was worried about confidentiality. And it's like basically a lot of the data in there that's this concept called guardrails, stuff that's, that can't be, it shouldn't be identified as has rails around it. That also creates that black box though, unfortunately. It means that, you can't dig back to find it. But I'm going to say, I do like your idea. It's like, hey, let's stop. Because I think as ombuds, we can always ask questions. We could go back and say, look, this customer had an adverse impact or some sort of adverse situation. Can we reconstruct this without the AI? I think that would be a simple solution. I think in the beginning days of AI that we're in now, that might be a reasonable request. I could see somewhere down the road where they're going to say, "Oh no, guy, we've modeled out everything there is. There can't be any bias." I hope that day never comes, but I think it could. So, but thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you all for that.
Yes, I just wanted to address the second part of the question about who should be brought into the discussion, who may not be. I think always the potential visitor or participant who is engaging with the ombuds. Ombuds, as a general matter, I think are honored to hold a role, a role or position of trust in an organization and with the visitor. So I think that to engage actively, either the populations or communities that that utilize the ombudsman, it's very critical to get their acknowledgement, awareness, to hear their thoughts and feedback. And certainly, if there is an ethical qualm that they have about utilizing AI that's something that has to be brought into the discussion because, again, it's at the end of the day, it's the position of trust the ombudsman holds, and without that, then it kind of falls apart. Their ability to serve the visitor.
Great, thanks, Sharon.
I was just going to say that I think that so this issue, the topic of transparency, I think that in particular, maybe organizational ombuds, which I'm not, it sort of pushes you to maybe challenge how your end goal might need to change. So in the long-term care ombudsman world, resolution to a complaint is based on the resident's satisfaction. And because we are, I can't tell you how many times when we come up with a complaint from a resident, such as when I turn on my call light, no one comes, or it takes 2 hours for someone to respond. We are data and information. The provider will throw information at us to prove that the resident is wrong. Resident has dementia, resident has mental illness. They're not dealing in the real world. The last place I'm going to look at is, or rely on, is the answer from AI, where I don't even know what information went into their decision. As long as there is this black box that Jean-Marc talks about, to me, I throw it away. I throw away their answers, because if I don't know what's involved in all of that, and I can't explain that to my client, my customer, the resident, and to me, that wastes a lot of time when the end goal for ombudsman, long-term care ombudsman, is, what does the resident want? What does the client want? And does the solution satisfy them? That's my end goal. So.
Thank you. I feel like, so I knew going into this an hour would not be enough to tackle this, but hopefully this is meant to be like a toe dip. The questions that we have in the Q&A are like chef's kiss of the variety of ways that we should be querying and asking and exploring. I did kind of want to end on I wanted to give you all something to think about. And I knew kind of where this panel would go from talking to you all earlier. And I don't know if you all saw this, but in the New York Times last week, there was this article that says, "I'm a doctor, ChatGPT's bedside manner is better than mine." And an argument is laid out for how a doctor learned bedside manner through very rote scripts. This is how you respond in X. And that being spontaneous is actually not so good in those situations. And that the most emotional support a person got was through those rote means. And I want to say, so Ryan, your entry into the session here was about this focus on feeling heard. And Guy, you just said to the lawyers, it's not about the facts. It's about the customer or the person's, how they're feeling about this experience. And so as a person who has taught online many a year and had automatic emails to students that inputted their name, inputted some feedback, and they say, I felt heard. I felt like I was connected to. And there's 200 of them and one of me. And so even though I did not feel connected to them, they felt connected to me, and the mission was met. So I just want to toss out this idea of what does it mean in the time of AI, and what does it mean for human experience and touch and connection? And are we limiting ourselves based on our own kind of experience and expectations of what that looks like. So, Ryan, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you all, reactors and audience, for being so thoughtful with those questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, reactors. And thank you, participants, for engaging. That was incredible. It has given me a lot to think about. I'm sure it's given all of us a lot to think about. I'm probably going to have to go back to the recordings and watch them again to really kind of process a lot of what was shared, because that was great. So I'm excited by the potential that AI brings. I'm reassured by the thoughtfulness around it. I feel like that's the scary part sometimes. So if you have not yet done so, go online, go to ombudsday.com, see what other folks are doing on this day. There's a lot of engagement on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, for those of you who are on social media. If you're holding events with your organizations, please share them. Please share them on social media, share pictures, #OmbudsDay. It's really interesting to see what's going on out there today. So, like I said, this is one of the many celebrations of Ombuds Day in the States and globally. So check it out. Thank you all for staying with us. Thank you all for participating, and happy Ombuds Day.